Chapter 7. Moses a prince is born. And he a Hebrew slave said, Who made thee a prince and a judge over us? X. 2:14. Some men become kings by inheriting a throne, others have money to buy the office. Still others manage to kill off all competitors. Then there are those who are born to become a king by divine right, chosen in the pre-mortal state to become prophets, priests, and kings on earth. Such was the case with Moses. The royal lineage for the priesthood and kingdom of God came down through great prophets to Moses. The people at his time were unorganized, uninspired, and serving as slaves. The land of Egypt was ruled by a wicked pharaoh. He was probably not acquainted with the history of Joseph, who once lived and ruled in Egypt. After 400 years, the history of Joseph had been forgotten even by the children of Israel. Although the children of Israel were entitled to bear the rights of the holy priesthood, the right to rule on the earth, they did not even remotely resemble godly priests and kings. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor, and they made their lives bitter with bondage, in mortar and in brick, and in all manner of service in the field. X. 1:13-14. But this was not all. The king ordered the Egyptians, Every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive. X. 1:22. Why did this Egyptian king want to kill the male children who could grow up to be his slaves? It was evident he thought that one of them would cause him to lose his throne and power. But God planned to intercede. He remembered his covenant with Israel, and provided a deliverer, Moses. When Moses was born, his mother was able to hide him for 3 months. But then she had to think of some other way to save him. She made a little ark and placed him on the Nile River, the river in which other Hebrew children were being drowned. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along by the river's side. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. X. 2:5. Coincidentally, the very people that sought to kill him were the same that actually saved his life. Not only did they save him, they placed him in a position to become the king of Egypt. When Pharaoh sent his soldiers to kill the Israelite boy babies, they killed all except the one they were after. Then the miracle continued. Without knowing the real identity of the baby, the king's wife paid the mother of Moses to nurse her own baby. Pharaoh raised the very child he feared and adopted him as a son. The whole story is almost unbelievable, but it shows how the powers of God's kingdom are greater than the powers of the devil's kingdom. Of Moses' young life, Exodus says only, when Moses was grown... and yet 40 years had passed by. Stephen, the apostle of Christ, said that Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and was mighty in his words and in deeds. Acts 7:22. Moses received the best training available, and learned all about the kingdom of the Egyptians. After all, he was a prince about to become a king. Moses first became a hero not because of being a prophet, but rather a military general. When the Ethiopian armies came down from the headwaters of the Nile, they found the Egyptians easy prey, and took many of their cities. Pharaoh, not knowing what to do, called upon his priests for divine guidance. It is not known if they actually got some inspiration to pick Moses to lead the armies, or if they thought to get rid of him by sending him to battle. Nevertheless, with the priests' encouragement, Pharaoh allowed Moses to lead the troops. See the Third Thousand Years, Skousen, pages 199-201. Moses proved himself to be an excellent tactician in field maneuvers, and routed the enemy from behind, and overtook many of their cities with a great slaughter. Finally, at the capital of the Ethiopians, it appeared to be the last major battle. But the enemy stood firm inside of their island city, with its high walls and the river surrounding and protecting them. Not even Moses knew how to take the city. Then an unusual thing happened. Tharbis, the daughter of the king of the Ethiopians, happened to see Moses as he led the armies, and she fell in love with him. In this, Moses saw an opportunity to end the war and to save many lives. The Ethiopians not only delivered up the bride, but also their city. Marriages between royalty were common. It was an international insurance policy for the prevention of war between nations. This was the purpose of the marriage of Prince Moses to Princess Tharbis. God must have approved of the marriage, because later when Miriam and Aaron ridiculed Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married, Num 12:1, Miriam was struck with leprosy, and Aaron got a severe reprimand from the Lord. But this great war with the Ethiopians elevated Moses to a national war hero. Moses came to see his brethren the Hebrew slaves in Egypt, and observed an Egyptian taskmaster smiting one of the Hebrews. Moses weighed the matter, knowing that by challenging an Egyptian, he could suffer serious consequences. He also knew that these were God's chosen people, and he ought to defend them. When no other Egyptians were around, he smote him dead and buried him in the sand. The next day 2 Israelites were fighting between themselves, and when Moses tried to settle the issue, one of them said, "Who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me, as thou didst the Egyptian?" X 2:14. The news was out and Moses feared, and said, "Surely this thing is known." Cleon Skousen explained the resulting aftermath. Among slaves there are always informers who seek special favors from their masters by passing along information of misconduct or insurrection among the ranks. Consequently, it was not long before Pharaoh had heard this whole story. It is easy to imagine the scandal it created in the court of Egypt's omnipotent ruler. Not only had the adopted son of the Pharaoh's daughter turned renegade and gone back to his people, but he had dared to kill an Egyptian officer. This could almost be counted an act of treason. It even might have started an insurrection and a strike for freedom by the Egyptian slaves. In the mind of Pharaoh, this act of Moses was unforgivable. He caught the full political implication of this whole situation. The priests had been right. The Pharaoh's royal wrath reached such heights that he forgot all about the mighty deeds of the past which Moses had wrought for Egypt. The Pharaoh angrily ordered his soldiers to hunt Moses down and kill him on sight. What would the former crown prince do? Moses was far too well acquainted with the cruel and cunning mind of the Egyptian ruler to take a chance on pleading for mercy or justice. He quickly determined to flee from Egypt and abandon the land of his birth forever. The third 1,000 years, Skousen, pages 206-07. Moses knew he was to lead the children of Israel, and by killing the Egyptian, he thought the Hebrews would understand that. He supposed that his brethren understood that God was giving them deliverance by his hand. Acts 7:25. But they didn't understand. Nevertheless, Moses was determined to follow the living God. By faith Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt. Heb 11:24-26. Since Moses was willing to give up his chance to be the king of Egypt, God promised that his losses and sacrifice would be stepping stones for something even better. His kingship in Egypt would be traded for kingship in the kingdom of God.